you guys just rocketed with growth the moment he got out there. I think he's been out there almost 20 years or something, and everything was going great, so it seemed.
Man, the good times, I mean, I feel like Flatirons in the early days was the Wild West, man. Like, it was just whatever goes, just trying to figure it out. I mean, there are legendary stories from before I got there where between Sundays, they're trying to move walls in the auditorium just to fit more people in there. People are watching through windows outside. The bathrooms break. And so they had to send everybody to Taco Bell to use the restroom. And so, like, just kind of crazy Wild West stories. And it was just... those days were a blast. I learned this from my therapist, Harv Powers, who's just been a godsend to us and our whole church. Jim and I actually see him together on a regular basis. We need couples counseling is what we call it. So
that's so good.
And then it's a model developed by Robert Hoover, who worked at the University of Cincinnati back in the 60s. So it's been around for a while. And what he was trying to show is that there's a pace of change when it comes to people's question of an organization and the doubt they might express. And so maybe your listeners have experienced something like this where a question goes unaddressed and then it seems like...
Hey, welcome to Simple Faith. Today, we get to have a conversation with just an excellent leader at a church in Colorado. And he's going to walk us through an epidemic in not only your organization, but could even be in your household, where you have people that are beginning to have organizational doubt when it comes to, hey, do I trust the leaders in charge here? Do I trust what's going on? Are they going the right direction? Is this a place I want to be? And if you lead anything, whether it's your family, or whether it's the PTA or a church or a business, you've got levels of this in your organization. Jesse DeYoung is executive pastor of one of the largest churches in America called Flatirons Church out in Boulder, Colorado, with multiple sites. Incredible place. And he has such great wisdom when it comes to what do you do with organizational doubt. Before we get to Jesse, I just want to invite you, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast, whether that's wherever you get your podcast or on YouTube, I want to encourage you to do that. And here's why. Because out of the thousands of people that download every single week, only 15% have actually subscribed. Now, why does that matter? Because when we go to get guests, when we go to interview just incredible people that have written incredible books and have great resources that I don't have a personal relationship with, they always want to know, how many subscribers do you have? Is it worth my time? And it's not enough for me to say, there's thousands of really good people that listen. They want to know subscribers. So if you would subscribe, that would be huge, because the more that you subscribe, the more subscribers we have, the better guests that we get, and the more valuable this content really is. Thank you for all of you who have already clicked subscribe, but if you haven't, would you do that right now? Okay, today you get to hear from my friend, soon to be yours, the pastor, the amazing leader, Jesse DeYoung. Jesse DeYoung, great to have you on the podcast. We have known each other for a few years, had a few sit-down dinners or conversations together, but never been on the podcast together. And I had a chance to hear this conversation we're about to have on a different podcast, which was awesome, Leaders in Living Rooms. But I wanted to bring you on and let our audience hear from you, because you're an incredible communicator and pastor of one of the fastest growing, largest churches in America out in Boulder, Colorado, called Flatirons. I'd love for our people to get to know you. So before we get into kind of your story that you've been through, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, Rusty, so glad to be part of the podcast today. And my name's Jesse, been married to my wife, Kara, for coming up on 19 years. And we got 4 kids. One just started driving, and I think she's been driving for 3 weeks on her own. She drove in the snow today. So praying, crossing our fingers, and trying to do any good luck charms we have there. And then I've been at Flatirons for 13 years in different roles on the teaching team, campus pastor, on the exec team. And then I've been the executive pastor here for the last 4 years. And man, we love the church. We love Jim, our lead pastor, and we love living in Colorado.
Now, Jim Bergen and I had a chance to work together in Kentucky for a year. What a great run we had. We had 1 year with Jim Bergen, John Weiss, Mike Bro, and myself, and we had more fun than we should ever be allowed.
What? Did we just become best friends?
Yup.
Do you want to go do karate in the garage?
Yup.
And then we all went separate ways, and
Sure.
we all did our own thing, and it was just great fun. But Jim is an incredible communicator. He's incredibly passionate, big vision, big leader kind of guy, and you guys just rocketed with growth the moment he got out there. I think he's been out there almost 20 years or something, and everything was going great, so it seemed. And you guys kind of went through a dark day, and you talk about this openly on many other podcasts, especially you and Jim together on the Carey Nieuwhof podcast, which was phenomenal. Tell our listeners a little bit about some of the good times and then the bad.
Man, the good times, I mean, I feel like Flatirons in the early days was the Wild West, man. Like, it was just whatever goes, just trying to figure it out. I mean, there are legendary stories from before I got there where between Sundays, they're trying to move walls in the auditorium just to fit more people in there. People are watching through windows outside. The bathrooms break. And so they had to send everybody to Taco Bell to use the restroom. And so, like, just kind of crazy Wild West stories. And it was just, those days were a blast. I think it's Les McCune who talks about the phase of whitewater, where just things are like, you're just rolling, you're having fun. But we always were we didn't want to be a corporate church. We didn't want to be that way. And so we just resisted a lot of systems and a lot of structures that even felt like that. And so, Rusty, if you can imagine, I think we hired our first HR person when we had 100 people on staff. And so if you can imagine having 100 people on staff, no HR people, we're just bootstrapping the whole thing. But that's been the way that it was. And what happened is we were experiencing double-digit growth. And then this is my opinion, and Jim might have another opinion, but I believe that our growth outpaced our systems and our structures that could hold the growth and could hold the momentum. And eventually, we fell to the level of our systems, as James Clear says. And so for us, and during that time, a couple factors, and this might help some listeners because they might be able to point to people on their staff in different places, but we had hired maybe 50 staff within 2 years. And so we had a ton of new people on staff, and new staff people go through what sociologists call organizational adolescence. And so there's this idea that they're trying to find their value. They're trying to find their identity as a staff person. But the only way they know how to do that is the same way a teenager does it. And that's in opposition to the authority. It's in opposition to the organization. And so they're walking through a period where they're questioning everything. And then we had a bunch of mid-level managers who were new to the role. They had just gone from being peers to being leaders. And I'm sure you've gone through that. I feel like that's probably the toughest transition for a leader to make, probably outside becoming the senior leader of an organization, because these people who were your friends and you used to chat with and everything was just normal. Now you're having to correct them. You're having to have hard conversations. And our mid-level leaders, myself included during that time, we really struggled with lovingly realigning people. And instead, we would do this thing, and maybe you've seen this before, maybe you've done it, is people would come into our office and they would talk about the issues they had or their frustrations, and they would say all this, and we'd be like, man, I hear you. That's hard. Well, hang in there. And we were passively affirming rather than lovingly realigning. So they start to believe like, hey, I'm correct. My doubts, my questions, my frustrations are actually, they're correct, and the organization's actually in the wrong. Yep. And then the other two factors, we just had an overwhelmed executive team. And then Rusty, we were pushing all blame, all issues, all responsibility up toward Jim. And so Jim was carrying far more than any leader of an organization should have to carry. I think our church was 16,000 people at the time. We had 170 staff. We're just pushing all of this weight onto him. Nobody's trying to take it off of him. And when Jim reflects on that season, he reflects on just being tired and exhausted, and it came out sideways. But he was like, he wasn't tired because of the pace. He was tired because of the weight. And we just kept on putting all the weight of all the major things on Jim. And that ended up with Jim getting pretty unhealthy, and he's talked about that before. And the elders pulled him aside, and Jim took a 6-month sabbatical where he got healthy. And in that season, the rest of the staff, we looked at Jim, and it was just so easy to put all blame, all issues, all responsibility up at Jim. And so we're like, man, I think Jim's the problem. Mm-hmm. We're not the problem. Jim's the problem. Mm-hmm. And so when Jim's gone, we're like, hey, if Jim's out of the picture, things are going to get great. And Rusty, it was like 6 days before I was like, can we just call Jim and bring him back right now? Like we need some help here. And we realized the thing was fundamentally broken from top to bottom. And during that season, Jim got healthy. The staff didn't. And when Jim came back, there was an adjustment period. But then we just also had a lot of staff who looked at Jim and would say things like, Jim he's my boss, but he's not my pastor. And there's just something fundamentally broken when you say stuff like that. So we had such lack of alignment, such bad culture on our team that during the summer of 2020, we actually offered people the opportunity to step off our staff, take severance. And we thought like out of 165 staff, like 20 would take it. And I think the final total was like 55 people said, hey, I would rather be unemployed than work for you guys. And that was a wake-up call for us. We've got to work on our culture. We've got to get things right. We've got to bring staff health back to our organization.
Okay, so there's a couple of things here I want to dive into because obviously you've mentioned culture, and we're going to get to that, but you mentioned systems. And this is one of the things that I think we all overlook because we're so busy trying to build the weekends. We forget about the rest of the week and the systems that are needed. What did you notice where, oh my goodness, we don't have a system for that? What did you not have or what was broken?
We did not have a system. Just one thing was employee onboarding was one of the systems that we didn't have. But I'd say that the things that killed us is we didn't have a system for how we train mid-level leaders, especially. So we did not have a leadership system in where we taught them how to lead. And so they just got in there and everybody did what was right in their own eyes. And so that was a system we didn't have. We didn't have a system around our culture. And so we had at Flatirons had a strong culture that started to get sideways. And so after Jim got back, we actually worked on defining cultural values. And so we now have a system for these are our values. These are the kinds of people that will fit at Flatirons.
So Jesse, I hear you talk about this stuff with culture within the staff. And sometimes when things are bad in the staff, it leaks out into the church. Did you notice anything that they were picking up on, or did they just think, hey, the weekends are great, moving on?
Yeah, I think that's probably split because I talked to a good friend of mine now and they were just casual attenders. And he said, man, you guys did a great job. Whatever dysfunction that was going on behind the scenes, we could not tell on the weekends. The weekends just plugged along. But I think the closer that you got, the more involved you got as a volunteer, as a leader, you started to notice, oh man, the staff seem a little more discontent than they were. The staff are more easily frustrated. And so I really think that the core of our church was starting to see some of the cracks. But I think the crowd really were like, man, weekends are great. We love Jim. We love the church. And I would say probably, 60, 70% of our church was genuinely surprised that there was any issue that needed to be handled due to a sabbatical.
Yeah, that's interesting because oftentimes it's your higher level volunteers that probably are perceptive of it, but the common people in the church are thinking everything seems to be fine. So I
think we can fake a lot until we can't fake it anymore, right? and that's the hard part is we can keep on faking it for a long time.
Right. Yeah, and then people start to do ridiculous things. So,
sure.
All right, let's talk about this learning that you got, I think from a counselor, about this degrees of organizational doubt. And it was a big aha for you that you began to share with your staff and use as kind of a template for how to help people on your staff. Because the reality is, not everybody on your staff is going to think everything that the leader utters is brilliant and they're 100% in agreement with it.
Sure.
And if that is the case, then that's not the kind of staff you want to have. You need some people to push back a little bit, or the emperor
Absolutely.
has no clothes. So, all right, tell us a little about organizational doubt. Walk us through what you discovered.
Yeah, I learned this from my therapist, Harv Powers, who's just been a godsend to us and our whole church. Jim and I actually see him together on a regular basis. We need couples counseling is what we call it. So
that's so good.
And then it's a model developed by Robert Hoover, who worked at the University of Cincinnati back in the 60s. So it's been around for a while. And what he was trying to show is that there's a pace of change when it comes to people's question of an organization and the doubt they might express. And so maybe your listeners have experienced something like this, where a question goes unaddressed, and then it seems like the questioning starts to get worse and worse and drop down further. And like, let's say a youth pastor comes in and says, man, I think that we should have unlimited PTO, because I think I'm going to work harder if I work less. And so all about unlimited PTO. And then he never gets answered, or nobody says anything. Eventually that starts dropping down. That doubt's going to drop down a level. And he starts going, man, do we actually value people's off time? Do we value them as humans, or do we just care about them as cogs in a machine? Mm-hmm. And if that's unaddressed, it drops down to, man, we've got the wrong leaders, because these leaders, they don't care about people. They just care about the bottom line. Mm-hmm. And then eventually that staff member is just going to look at everything and say, everything is fundamentally broken about this organization. And so there's a cadence to this doubt. And if it doesn't get addressed at a certain level, it's going to drop down. It's going to be a deeper doubt. It's going to create more internal tension for the person who has this doubt. And ultimately, it's going to be harder to correct. And so I drew this up because for your listeners, I'll just put it right here on the screen. This is the process of organizational doubt. And if you can see it, it starts with suspended doubt.
This is a great time, Jesse, for me to plug our YouTube channel. Definitely want to make sure that people are able to see this. Lift it up just a little bit more. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I'll talk about them. You've got suspended doubt, operational doubt, ideological doubt, ethical doubt, and then absolute doubt. And then is a quick definition would be suspended doubt is when they doubt nothing. Operational doubt is when they're doubting the how. Ideological doubt is they're doubting the what you're doing. Ethical doubt, the who. And then absolute doubt is when they doubt everything. And so we can talk through what that looks like. Suspended doubt would be the staff people. And we love these staff people because typically they're new, and typically they're joining a church staff for the first time, or they're coming from a church maybe they didn't like. And so they join your staff and they're like, man, I love it here. You guys have nice coffee. You've got bubbly waters that you give us. There's a ping pong table here. Like, everything is great about this church. It's great. That would be suspended doubt. And then operational doubt is when they start asking questions. They're like, man, I'm not sure about how we do things. And that could be anything from, man, why do we play the music so loud? I think we should play the music softer, or I think we should do greeting a different way. And if that's not addressed at an operational level, then it's going to drop down to ideological doubt and ideological questions. And this is doubting more like big picture things, where they might start saying things like, man, the music's so loud in here, or the lights are so bright, I don't think we worship in the right way. I think like what we do when it comes to worship is just, it's fundamentally off. And then you can imagine if that question never gets answered, it drops down to the leader, where they start saying, man, these leaders, all they care about lights, shows, shock and mirror. They're just trying to grow a big church so that they can feed their egos. They're trying to grow a big church so that they can be on podcasts or on magazines, whatever that is. And it all starts getting directed at the leader. And then if that goes unaddressed, eventually it lands at absolute doubt. And absolute doubt is when they just say, everything they look at in the organization, they can critique. They've got a negativity bias that essentially says, no matter what happens, they're against it, they're frustrated with it. And at that point, one of the principles of organizational doubt that's the hardest is that people who are at absolute doubt, they cannot make the turn back to trust while staying at the organization.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to be a period of separation. There needs to be a time where they can actually see things from a fresh perspective.
Hey, let me interrupt this podcast for just a brief moment and tell you about our brand new book we have out called 40 Days to Easter. Starting March the 11th, we begin our 40-day journey to Easter. And spoiler alert, there's actually 42 days in there. So starting on March 10th, you can begin your journey to Easter and end on Easter Sunday itself with very short daily devotions going through the Gospel of Mark. You can pick up this book called 40 Days to Easter by Rusty George on Amazon today. Thanks so much. Back to the episode. So you get this insight, this learning. What was your next step? Did you just teach this to the staff and say, get it together? Or did you begin to think through things or implement some systems here? What was next now that you kind of understand a little bit of the progression of where doubt goes?
We have actually not taught this to our staff yet, Rusty. And so that's one of the next steps. I've talked to some churches who have done, I know that you've talked through this content with your team. And then I talked with another staff member who says every HR conversation that's corrective pulls out the organizational doubt chart. And they talk about what level of doubt the person feels like they're in when it comes to an HR perspective. We really spent time training our mid-level team. We call it Strategic Alignment Team or SAT. We trained them on this content so that they could really see where are your staff people and the questions that they're asking. Are they just some operational questions that need to be addressed, or has it gone down to ethical where they're starting to doubt my heart? They're starting to doubt Jim's heart. They're doubting the leadership. And one of the principles of organizational doubt is whatever level of doubt that you express outwardly, your internal level of doubt is actually one layer deeper. And so what's good is that anytime somebody asks a question that surfaces that, hey, there's some doubt there that we've got to address. But at the same time, if they're asking questions on an operational level, they're starting to have some ideological doubt. They're starting to doubt some of the big picture of things. If they're starting to ask routinely ideological questions, hey, I don't think we're doing worship in the right way. I don't think we're doing greeting in the right way or service in the right way. That means that they're starting to experience some ethical doubt. And then this is the one that just, I think, might be an aha for a lot of listeners, is if they're consistently critiquing the leaders of the organization, the who that's leading, they're asking a lot of ethical doubt questions. That shows that their actual level of doubt internally is already at absolute doubt. And there's not coming back from absolute doubt in the organization, I believe.
Okay, so some people will self-identify and say, I've reached it. Ideologically, I am not into the lights and the loud music. We should be more like a monastery. We need to change things up. I'm going to go, become Greek Orthodox or whatever.
Sure.
Some people self-identify and just quietly walk away. But some people, they stay, but they feel like it's my moral obligation to sound the alarm around here because the style in which we do church is an offense to God. What do you do with that situation?
Man, dude, such an insightful question. And we've had, I was going to say handfuls of those over the years, but we've had basketfuls of those over the years. And I think it's McKinsey and Company did a study. They said that it's between 3/5 and I think it's 2/5 of your staff, of typical staff, would consider themselves quiet quitters. And of that 2/5, I think 11% are disruptors. And so quiet quitters, we've heard all the stats around it. We've heard what they are, but they're just going to do the bare minimum. They're not really working, and they're not going to sacrifice for the mission. Instead, they'll sacrifice the mission for their personal agenda. But they're doing just mediocre work. And we can talk about them at some point. But the disruptors, those 10% are just, those are people that you have to start having conversations with. And what I've found is that when we have conversations with disruptors, they feel like there's a righteous internal activism where it's like, I see things the right way, you guys see things the wrong way. And I think that's why being really clear on your cultural values and really clear on your strategy is so important, because you can say, hey, you are a great person. You've got great ideas. We're not saying the way we do it is the right way. We're saying that it's our way. And everybody who works here has to believe that we do things our way. And so we would have conversations with those people and say like, hey, and we'd be very direct. I'm not sure that this is going to be the best fit for you. And I don't think you're going to love it here long term, because the way that you want to do things is very different than the way we do things. And a quick example, back when we got really close to defining our strategy as, hey, we've tried planting in urban settings campuses before, and it was a disaster. And as we've moved into suburban planting campuses, that's where we realized like we've got a sweet spot when it comes to 35 to 45-year-old men and their families. And that's who God's given us the grace to reach in a really effective way, but not in urban settings. And we had some staff people who were like, man, my passion is planting in urban settings. And for a while, they're sounding the alarm. They're like, we got to plant in urban settings. We got to plant in urban settings. And we just said, hey, if that's what you want to do, like, that's great. That's probably God's call on your life. That's not his call on our church. We're going to support planters who are going to plant there. We're going to support church plants and different organizations that are working in urban settings. But we know that's not what God has equipped us to do best. And sometimes just being so clear and clarifying, hey, this is what we're good at. This is our strategy. This is who we are, helps people. Either they self-identify or we can help clearly identify why they're not matching up to the organization.
Do you ever use this insight with high-level volunteers? Because I could see some people that are quiet quitters that are volunteers, but listen, they've been here this long, or their family loves it and they hate it, or they just read a book by, I don't know, some desert father, and they feel like we should do things differently. So do you have the same level of candor with them?
I've not used it. That is so good, Rusty. That is so good. And probably something that we should start equipping our whole team. That's a good reason to present this to our staff. I do know that we'll have candor with our key volunteers and just say, hey, this might not be the best fit for you. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I've got a lot of empathy for the people who are leading those volunteers. Oftentimes for us, our newer staff folks. Yeah. And like, they're still growing into their own leadership as well. And so we're patient, but man, that's something I'm going to actually take a note while we're podcasting, because I'm going to put that on one of our staff meeting agendas for the future.
I think about, the last couple of years, it was one documentary after another of failed churches, whether it was Rise and Fall of Mars Hill or the Hillsong documentary or whatever it is. And I think that our parishioners sometimes are keen to that and pay attention to that and wonder when the shoe's going to drop for their church. And so they become hypersensitive to anything that they might think is hero worship or out of the will of God, or this doesn't seem true, like true worship or whatever it is. I'm curious how we educate our people on, I love what you said, it's not about the right or wrong way. It's about this is our way. And that they're, to quote Andy Stanley, it's sometimes the best question isn't, is it right or wrong? Is it wise? Mm-hmm. And in our cultures, sometimes it's, hey, there's a church down the street that's doing it a different way, and they're going to be in heaven and we're going to be in heaven. We're going to continue to do it our way because we're the only one in the town that is trying to reach that type of person. Or, it's like you just said, it's not urban, it's suburban for us. I wonder, as you educate your staff about this, and what have you seen the result of all this be now that, even though you haven't communicated it in wide masses, you started to look for it internally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it has informed our conversations with newer staff. It's informed conversations when our mid-level team or our executive team are having conversations with people who are struggling and they're asking questions. First of all, it's helped us depersonalize the questions, and where I'm not getting offended if somebody's asking a question about how we do things. I'm not being like, oh, you're not bought in or you're not on board. I'm just realizing, oh, they're asking a very normal question question, and I try to look at it, I'm grateful that they surfaced this question so that they surfaced this doubt so that we can handle it. We've seen this model actually help people realign to our culture and our strategy, simply because if somebody's down at ideological doubt or ethical doubt, what we try to do is we try to answer the question that's below the question. And so if we have a staff person who comes in and they're asking like, man, I don't think we do worship the right way, let's say that, or we don't do serving people the right way, they're asking questions about the heart of the leader. Like what they're doubting is the heart of the leader.
Right.
And so we're regularly teaching our managers and our supervisors, like, you guys have to help us and you have to help the leadership team speak for our hearts. And then when I walk into places and meetings, they need to hear the how some, they need to hear the why some, but so often they need to hear from my heart. They need to hear from Jim's heart that, hey, we care about like our staff. We care about our church. We have a personal relationship with Jesus. That's the question that so many people are asking is, can I trust these leaders? What you talked about, with all the failure podcasts and the failure articles that are out there, people are conditioned to not trust their leaders.
Right.
And we've got to go in and show them our heart more than we show them our strategy. And Rusty, one of the things that we take the Best Christian Workplace survey yearly. That's if you can imagine, before Jim's sabbatical, it was not toxic, but it was just about there. I mean, there was just so much smoke coming. Yeah, there was so much smoke. And we've just been using that to help us inform what are areas that our staff need some clarity, need some help, need some realignment. And as we have codified our strategy, as we have codified our values, it gives them something that they can align to, and they're able to opt in or opt out. And so now I feel like when we hire people, we're able to hire people who know they're going to love working at Flatirons for the most part, rather than hiring people who have an idea of what the church is. They've got an idea of what it's going to be like, and then they get here, and after 2 months, it's a rude awakening, and they've dropped all the way down to ethical doubt.
That's such a good word. That is so, so true. I think we often overlook the necessity of onboarding. I know I often have. Okay, so I want you to talk to our pastors out there that are thinking, good grief, I only have so many hours during the week, and I got to write a message.
Yeah.
And I got to respond to emails, and I've got to engage with my community. And now you're talking about I have to be constantly thinking about where my staff is or our top level leaders are when it comes to this process of organizational doubt. And now suddenly I've got to reply to these emails of questions about why the music was so loud, as opposed to just find another church. So just get really granular here. How would you recommend to a pastor at a smaller scale than yours, how much time they should put into this during the week? Is this just hey, we have staff meeting once a month or once a week and I'll address it then? Or is it, I need to have a cadence of people that I go to lunch with and listen to them and ask for, feedback or whatever? Put this on a project list for me or on my calendar. When do I lean into this stuff so I make sure that I keep my eye on this target?
Man, I love that question. I want to hear what you would do as well. I would say, just off the top of my head, I would say you want to make sure that you start with your most, I don't want to say most valuable staff people, but your most influential staff people.
That's a good word.
They need to listen to your podcast. They need to get just a tiny bit of training when it comes to this, because you want them to be able to go before you. That's something that I do for Jim. And if you've got a staff person on your team, it is just so important that they understand this content so that they can be thinking about how they answered questions. The second thing is, I might have a team listen to this. I might have people do a little reading on it. I know that there are some blogs out there, but for the most part, I think this is more reactive content than it is something that needs to be studied and learned. I think managers should learn it, but outside that, I think it's more for us to use in response and in reaction. And so I think it's more helpful if you're answering the email, you're going to answer it one way or another. And I know if somebody sends me an email the Monday after I preached and they don't like one of the things that I said, I feel like their level of doubt is ethical doubt. I feel like they're absolute doubt. I want to be like, hey, go find another church. There are plenty of great churches out there, and we don't want you anyways.
Right.
And that's my flesh, and that's really not understanding what they're asking, when truly it's trying to diagnose, hey, what level of doubt is this email from? And then I just need to respond one level deeper. And so if they don't like the volume on the music, I don't just need to say, well, here's the study we did on music and we play it at 90 decibels or whatever it is. They need to hear the philosophy behind why we do worship the way that we do worship. And then always, I just feel like what's helpful is, and I think I heard this from Aaron Brockett, pastor of Traders Point in Indy. He just said, people don't need to hear what I think as much as they need to hear my heart. Mm-hmm. And if they trust my heart, then it doesn't matter if what I think is different than what they think. If they trust my heart, they can follow my lead. And I just thought that is so true. And so I think for all leaders, let them see your heart and let them know that you care about the things that are important to them, because everybody wants to work at a place where the leader cares about the most important things.
Right.
How do you think a pastor should apply this?
I think you nailed it with the whole, it's more reactionary than it is getting ahead of it, because sometimes you don't know about the things you're going to ask about or question. You know, if you're sitting out there in the congregation and you're on staff, when something happens and you think, why do we do it that way? You didn't see that coming. So it's hard to prepare for that, other than to equip your leaders with, let's let them ask that question. It's a safe place to push back. What is it Stanley says about, loyalty publicly allows you to leverage privately.
Yeah.
You know, where you can talk about these hard questions behind closed doors. And there may come a point that you just drift apart. I remember hearing a podcast many, many years ago, a guy said, hey, if everything you're running up the flagpole, no one's saluting, maybe you just need to take your flag elsewhere. It's a great idea. It's just not their idea. Yeah. So do it somewhere else. Rather than think that they're, morally inept at the place that you're at. But I think reactionary is good. And maybe it's just a simple question with people on staff of, is there anything that you have questions about that I might be able to provide insight? And,
sure.
Just see where it goes from there. That could go a long ways. I remember the whole music thing. It's funny, this one keeps coming up because it continues to be a problem, right? And you guys crush it when it comes to, your AV, your PA, your bands, everything. But somebody always thinks it's too loud. I did a survey one time with people that had come to faith at our church. And I said, what do you like about it? And I got our demographic. I got 35-year-old men.
Okay.
What do you like about it? Three comments were the most common. I like it that it's dark, which we always got feedback on. It's too dark in here. I can't read my Bible. Well, they said, I like it when it's dark because sometimes I tear up and I don't want anybody to see that.
So good.
I like it that it's cold because I'm always hot-blooded, and I like that it's cold in there. And the third one was, I like it that it's loud because if I sing, I don't want anybody to hear me.
We've got earplugs in the back. We tell people, hey, there are earplugs in the back.
That's the day we decided we're going to provide earplugs instead of turning it down. I totally get it. Too good. And most of us, there's people around us, we don't want to hear them singing anyway.
100%.
It's not good.
I like it when I can't even hear myself. Let's just keep it like that.
Well, Jesse, this is fantastic. You've given us a grid, a template for people to think through. If you're listening to this and you haven't been able to see the visual that Jesse gave, go check out our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to that so you can see all that content. But Jesse, tell us a little bit about where people can find you. I take it you're on social media. Are you still on MySpace? Is that where you're primarily at right now? Or
that's where I do my best work there, MySpace, and I've got Twitter, but I didn't convert it to X. No, I'm on, you can email me at Jesse_DeYoung at Flatirons.church.com. I'm on Instagram. I think Jesse.DeYoung. Facebook. My mom and I keep in touch there. And then, Rusty, I tell you, if somebody has questions, wants to talk more, we want to send some voice memos back and forth, they can just text me. It's 502-876-6525. And
wow,
shoot me
you're
a text.
a brave man.
I believe that the people who listen to your podcast are well vetted, and if they like you, then I'll probably like them.
That's awesome, man. That's high compliment. Appreciate that. Well, buddy, this has been great. Always good catching up. All the best to you guys out there and in Colorado. It's beautiful this time of year. The snow is awesome, and I know you guys know how to drive in it, so good for you.
We're doing our best. Rusty, thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate you, man. Love you, man.
Well, Jesse, thank you so much. That was so awesome. Great stuff for you to use in any team that you're in. And you can even begin to investigate this with your family when it comes to your kids. Where are they at on the organizational doubt? Do they buy into everything that you and your spouse are saying? Odds are they probably aren't. If they're teenagers, odds are that they are adamantly opposed. But it will help you begin to understand where they're coming from, and certainly with your staff and what other organization you might be leading. Hey, thank you for listening. Thank you to Jesse. Thank you for our sponsors. And we will see you next week with brand new content. And as always, keep it simple.